The hall was not meant for anything special that evening. It was one of those places people pass through without thinking much about it. Folding chairs were placed in uneven rows. The lights were bright but not warm, making everything look plain and ordinary. A few people chatted near the entrance. Others scrolled on their phones, waiting for the program to move along. No one came expecting to be surprised. She sat near the back, hands resting quietly in her lap. She blended into the room the way shadows blend into walls. Nothing about her drew attention. Her clothes were simple. Her posture was careful, almost guarded. She had learned long ago that being unnoticed was safer than being seen. Music was part of the evening, but only as background. A piano stood at the front, old but clean, its surface marked by years of casual use. It was there more for tradition than for art. Most people believed it would only be used for short, forgettable tunes to fill the silence between speeches. She had not planned to play. In fact, she had come only to support someone else. Sitting there, she told herself she was just another face in the crowd. That thought gave her comfort. No expectations meant no pressure. As the event moved forward, small performances came and went. Nothing bad, nothing great. Polite claps followed each one. People smiled out of habit, already forgetting what they had just heard. The room felt tired, like it was waiting for the night to end. At one point, there was an unexpected pause. The person organizing the program looked around, unsure how to fill the gap. Their eyes moved across the room, landing on people at random. Then their gaze stopped on her. "You play, right?" The voice asked, casual and light, as if it did not matter either way. The question caught her off guard. Her heart skipped, not loudly, but enough for her to feel it in her chest. She did not answer right away. A few heads turned in her direction. Nothing serious, just mild curiosity. "It doesn't have to be anything big," the person added quickly. "Just something simple. Just a few notes." Simple. That word echoed inside her. She nodded before she had time to overthink. Standing up, she felt every step as she walked toward the front. The distance between her seat and the piano felt longer than it really was. Each step carried memories she usually kept buried. She remembered playing alone late at night, keeping the sound low so no one would complain. She remembered being told that music was a hobby, not something to chase. She remembered how often people assumed she was average or worse, invisible. When she reached the piano, the room felt strangely quiet. Not silent, but thinner somehow. She sat down carefully, adjusting the bench. Her fingers hovered above the keys, not touching them yet. From the audience, expectations were almost non-existent. Some people leaned back in their chairs. Others looked away. A few whispered to each other. No one leaned forward. No one held their breath. She placed her hands on the keys and paused. For a brief moment, doubt tried to pull her back. She could still stop. She could still apologize and return to her seat. No one would remember. No one would care. But something inside her resisted that thought. She had spent years promising herself that one day, if the chance came, she would not shrink. Even if no one believed in her, she would believe in herself for those few minutes. She took a slow breath and began. The first notes were soft and careful, exactly what everyone expected. Simple, gentle, almost background sound. A few people nodded politely. Someone coughed. Someone else checked their phone. She kept playing, letting the familiar rhythm settle her nerves. The piano felt different under her hands now, not like a stranger, but like an old friend. The room faded slightly as she focused on the sound she was creating. Though the notes were simple, there was intention in every one. She was not rushing. She was not showing off. She was telling a quiet story, one that began long before that night. Her shoulders relaxed. Her breathing steadied. She forgot about the audience for a moment. She played the way she always did when she was alone. Somewhere in the room, someone looked up. It was not because the music was loud or fast. It was because it felt honest. There was a warmth in it that did not demand attention but gently invited it. A few conversations stopped. A few phones were lowered. Still, no one expected anything extraordinary. They only sensed that this was not entirely ordinary. She continued, still keeping it simple, still holding back parts of herself. This was only the beginning. She knew that. Part of her was still testing the space, checking if it was safe to go further. As she played, memories moved through her quietly. Long hours of practice after difficult days. Moments of doubt when she wondered if any of it mattered. Times when she played not for applause, but to understand herself. Those memories shaped her touch on the keys. They gave weight to the silence between notes. The room felt different now. Not electric, not dramatic, just attentive in a way it hadn't been before. People were listening, even if they didn't realize it yet. She reached the end of the opening section and let the final note fade naturally. For a second, she wondered if she should stop there. That would have fulfilled the request. Something simple. Nothing more. Her fingers hesitated above the keys again. Then she made a choice. She did not look up. She did not check the audience. She trusted her instincts and moved forward, preparing to let the music speak more clearly. The simple beginning had done its job. It had opened the door. What came next would change everything, even if no one in the room realized it yet. She did not realize how quiet the room had become. At first, she was only aware of the piano and the steady movement of her fingers. The world outside the sound felt far away, like it had softened its edges just for her. She leaned slightly forward, letting the music guide her instead of fear. The simple tune began to change almost without effort. The notes grew deeper, fuller, not louder but more confident. It was as if the piano itself had been waiting for her to stop holding back. Her hands moved with purpose now, shaped by years of silent practice and patience. In the audience, a few people shifted in their seats. Someone who had been half listening suddenly felt something tug at their attention. It was not a sharp pull, more like a quiet tap on the shoulder, asking them to listen a little closer. She still did not look up. She was afraid that if she did, doubt might return. Instead, she focused on the familiar feeling of the keys beneath her fingers. Each one carried weight, memory, and choice. She was no longer just playing notes. She was sharing pieces of herself. There was a moment when her hands paused briefly, hovering in the air. That pause held more emotion than sound. In that space, she felt everything she had carried for years. The times she was told to stay realistic. The moments she swallowed her dreams because they seemed too fragile. The nights she practiced quietly, believing no one would ever hear her. Then she pressed the keys again. This time, the music opened up. It moved with emotion that could not be ignored. It spoke of hope, of loss, of quiet strength built over time. Even without words, it told a story people could feel in their chests. A woman in the front row stopped tapping her foot. A man near the aisle lowered his phone completely. Someone near the back leaned forward without realizing it. The room was no longer waiting for the performance to end. It was fully present. She felt it too. The energy had shifted. The air felt warmer, heavier, like everyone was breathing together. For the first time that evening, she felt seen not as a person on display, but as someone being understood. Her confidence grew with every measure. Her hands moved more freely now, gliding across the keys with intention. The music rose and fell naturally, like a conversation instead of a performance. She was no longer thinking about whether it was good enough. She was simply telling the truth in the only way she knew how. Somewhere in the middle of the piece, emotion crept into her throat. Not sadness exactly, but release. She had carried so much of herself quietly for so long. Letting it flow out felt both terrifying and freeing. She adjusted her breathing and kept going. The piano responded to her touch as if it understood her struggle. Each note landed with care, never rushed, never forced. People in the audience began exchanging looks. Not the distracted kind from earlier, but glances filled with surprise. They were realizing something together without saying it out loud. This was not a simple filler performance. This was something rare. She reached a section where the melody softened again, pulling back just enough to keep everyone leaning in. The contrast made the emotion stronger. Silence wrapped around the notes, giving them space to settle. She remembered why she loved music in the first place. It was never about attention. It was about connection. About saying things she never learned how to speak. Her fingers trembled slightly, but she did not stop. That small shake carried honesty. It made the music feel alive. A man near the center of the room swallowed hard, unsure why his eyes felt warm. A teenager sitting with crossed arms slowly relaxed their posture. The performance was touching places people did not expect. She played on, unaware of the exact reactions, but feeling the shared stillness. That silence between notes felt like respect. The melody climbed higher, not in volume but in feeling. Carried longing and strength at the same time. The kind built through endurance, not applause. As she played, her past no longer felt heavy. Felt meaningful. Every ignored moment, every quiet practice, every doubt had led her here. The piano filled the room now, not with noise, but with presence. Even the walls seemed to listen. She approached the final section slowly, giving each phrase room to breathe. She wanted this part to linger, not rush past like so many things in her life had. Her hands slowed, then moved with careful intention. The emotion settled into something calm and steady, like acceptance. By the time she reached the last notes, the room was completely still. No shifting, no whispers, just attention. She let the final note fade naturally, allowing the sound to disappear on its own. She did not lift her hands right away. She sat there, breathing, letting the moment exist. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. Then someone inhaled sharply. Someone else whispered a quiet wow without meaning to. She finally lifted her hands and looked up. What she saw startled her. Every face was turned toward her. Not out of politeness, not out of habit, but with genuine emotion, surprise, respect. She had been asked to play something simple. She had given them something real. And without realizing it, she had changed the way the room saw her forever. She stayed seated for a moment after the last note faded, unsure what to do with the silence that followed. It felt heavier than the music itself. Her hands rested loosely in her lap, fingers still warm, as if the piano had left an echo inside them. She had played the truth, and now she did not know how the room would answer. The first sound was not applause. It was a breath, then another. The room seemed to wake up slowly, like people returning from a shared dream. Chairs creaked as bodies shifted. Someone cleared their throat, not out of impatience, but because emotion had caught there. Then the clapping began. It was hesitant at first, as if people were checking whether it was appropriate to break the quiet. One pair of hands started, then another. Within seconds, the sound grew fuller, stronger, until it filled the space completely. It was not polite applause. It was real. She stood up slowly, almost unsure if the reaction was meant for her. The sound washed over her, unfamiliar and overwhelming. She offered a small nod, more out of instinct than confidence. As she stepped away from the piano, people's eyes followed her. She could feel it now, the attention she had avoided for so long. It was not uncomfortable, but it was new. She had spent years staying small, careful not to take up space. Now the space seemed to open around her. She returned to her seat near the back, heart still racing. The applause continued even after she sat down. Someone near her whispered something she couldn't quite hear, but the tone carried respect. Another person gave her a quiet smile, the kind that felt sincere, not forced. The program moved on, but it felt different now. The next speaker stepped up, trying to regain the flow of the evening, but something had shifted. The room was no longer half present. People were alert, listening, as if reminded that something meaningful could happen without warning. She sat there, replaying the performance in her mind. Every note, every pause. She wondered if she had revealed too much of herself. For years, she had kept that part hidden, believing it did not belong in public spaces. Yet she did not regret it. A memory surfaced from long ago. She was younger, practicing in a small room with worn walls. Someone had passed by and told her she played nicely, then added, "But don't expect much from it." She had nodded then, accepting the limit placed on her. That sentence had followed her for years. Now, sitting in that hall, she felt the weight of that memory loosen. During a break, a few people stood and stretched. Conversations restarted, but many were quieter than before. She noticed people glancing in her direction, not staring, just noticing. She felt exposed, yet strangely calm. Someone approached her seat and stopped a short distance away. They did not rush or interrupt. Their voice was gentle when they spoke, telling her how the music had made them feel. Not praising her skill, but thanking her for the emotion. She listened, surprised by how deeply her playing had reached someone she did not know. She replied softly, unsure what to say. Words felt small compared to what had just happened. Another person came by later, then another. Each interaction was brief, respectful. No one demanded explanations. No one treated her like a spectacle. They treated her like a human being who had shared something real. The rest of the event passed in a blur. She remained present, but part of her stayed with the piano with that moment of release. She realized she had crossed an invisible line inside herself. There was no going back to pretending her music did not matter. As the evening came to a close, people began gathering their things. Chairs scraped against the floor. Laughter returned in small pockets. The ordinary sounds of departure filled the room. She stood near the exit, hesitating. The piano sat quietly at the front again, just a piece of furniture now. She felt a strange pull toward it, like saying goodbye to a place she had briefly belonged. She looked around one last time. The hall looked the same as before. The lights were still bright and plain. The chairs still uneven. Nothing about the space had changed. But she had. Outside, the air felt cooler. She took a deep breath and let it fill her lungs. The noise of the street felt sharper after the stillness inside. Life continued, as it always did, indifferent and fast. She walked slowly, allowing herself to process everything. Doubt tried to creep back in, whispering that the moment was temporary, that people would forget. But another voice, quieter and steadier, reminded her that she would not forget. Later that night, alone again, she sat in silence. No piano, no audience, just herself and the echo of what she had done. She realized that the performance was not the most important part. The choice was. She had chosen not to stay hidden. She had chosen to trust herself, even when the room expected very little. That choice felt powerful in a way applause never could. She did not know what would happen next. Opportunities or nothing at all. Praise or silence. None of it felt as important anymore. What mattered was that she had finally allowed her true voice to exist in the open. And once something real is heard, it can never be completely silenced again. The days after the performance did not arrive with fireworks or sudden fame. They arrived quietly, one morning at a time. She woke up the next day expecting to feel different, but life looked the same. The same light through the window, the same routine. For a moment, she wondered if the night before had been a dream, but something inside her had shifted. She noticed it in small ways. When she made her morning tea, her hands felt steadier. When she walked outside, her steps felt less rushed. It was not confidence in the loud sense. It was a calm knowing, like standing on solid ground after years of balancing. People who had been at the event reached out slowly. Not everyone, not all at once. A short message here. A quiet comment there. Some spoke about how the music stayed with them. Others simply said they hoped she would play again someday. No one pushed. No one demanded more. That made it easier to breathe. She returned to the piano that evening, sitting in the same familiar spot she had practiced in for years. The room was small and silent. No audience. No lights. Just her and the keys. She placed her hands down and paused, feeling the difference. Before, playing alone had been an escape. Now, it felt like a continuation. She began to play, not trying to recreate what had happened, but letting her fingers move naturally. The sound filled the room, softer than before, but just as honest. She realized she no longer felt like she was hiding. Even in private, she allowed herself to play fully. Over the next few days, she noticed how her memory of the performance returned at unexpected moments. while waiting in line, while walking down the street. The image of the quiet room, the shared silence, the applause that followed. It did not inflate her ego. It grounded her. Still, doubt tried to find its way back in. Late one night, she sat with her thoughts, questioning whether she deserved the reaction she received. She reminded herself how quickly people moved on, how attention fades. The old voice whispered that maybe it had been luck. Maybe the room had been emotional for other reasons. She listened to that voice without letting it take control. For the first time, she answered it. She reminded herself of the years no one saw, the hours of practice, the sacrifices that were never praised. Luck did not sit with her through all of that. Effort did. A few days later, an unexpected opportunity appeared. It was not grand, not a stage or a spotlight, just an invitation to play at another small gathering. The message was polite and careful, giving her space to say no. She stared at the words for a long time. Part of her wanted to retreat, to protect the moment she had already experienced. What if the next time did not feel the same? What if the magic disappeared? Another part of her remembered the choice she had made that night. She accepted. The second performance felt different. The room was smaller, the audience closer. She felt nervous again, but it was a familiar kind now, not paralyzing. She played with honesty, not trying to impress, only to connect. The reaction was quieter than the first, but just as meaningful. Fewer people, same attention, same respect. That was when she understood something important. The power was not in the size of the audience. It was in her willingness to show up fully. As weeks passed, music became a more visible part of her life. She spoke about it more openly. She allowed people to know it mattered to her. That alone felt like a bold step. She did not quit everything else or make dramatic changes. Life continued with its responsibilities. But music no longer lived only in the corners of her time. It stood beside her, not behind her. She also noticed how her presence changed outside of music. She spoke more clearly. She held eye contact longer. She trusted her instincts more. The quiet confidence spilled into other areas of her life. People responded to that shift. Some encouraged her. Others were confused. A few seemed uncomfortable, as if they preferred the version of her that stayed small. She accepted that without resentment. Not everyone grows at the same pace. One afternoon, she walked past the hall where she had first played. The doors were closed. The building looked ordinary, almost forgettable. She paused for a moment, standing across the street. She did not feel the need to go inside. The place had served its purpose. What mattered now was what she carried forward. She realized that night had not given her permission to be herself. She had given herself that permission. That understanding stayed with her. It shaped the way she practiced, the way she accepted invitations, the way she spoke about her dreams without apology. Music was no longer something she did quietly on the side. It was something she owned. And with every honest note she played, she stepped further into a life she once believed was meant for someone else. Time continued to move forward, steady and ordinary, yet nothing felt the same to her anymore. The days blended into weeks and the weeks into months. There was no single moment where everything changed. Instead, change arrived in small, quiet ways that slowly reshaped her life. She kept playing. Not every day felt inspired. Some days her fingers felt stiff, her mind distracted. Other days the music flowed easily, reminding her why she began in the first place. She learned to accept both without judgment. Playing was no longer about proving anything. It was about staying honest with herself. She played at small gatherings when invited. Sometimes only a few people listened. Sometimes more. She learned not to measure the value of the moment by the size of the room. Each performance felt like a conversation, not a test. One evening, after finishing a short piece, she noticed a young person lingering nearby. They waited until most people had left before speaking. Their voice was unsure, but their eyes were bright. They said watching her play made them feel brave enough to keep practicing, even when no one paid attention. The words stayed with her long after the room emptied. She realized then that her story was no longer just hers. Without trying, she had become proof that quiet dedication mattered. That you did not need permission to take your passion seriously. Life still brought challenges. Bills still needed to be paid. Responsibilities did not disappear. There were moments when exhaustion crept in and old doubts tried to return. But now, when those thoughts appeared, they no longer had the same power. She had evidence. Not in trophies or headlines, but in lived experience. On nights when she felt unsure, she remembered the silence before the applause. The way the room had listened. The way she had chosen herself in that moment. That memory became a steady anchor. She also learned to speak kindly about her own journey. When asked about her music, she no longer brushed it off or changed the subject. She spoke simply and honestly. That alone felt like growth. One afternoon, she sat at the piano with the windows open, sunlight warming the keys. She played slowly, letting each note settle. There was no pressure to impress anyone. She smiled quietly to herself. She understood something then that she had never fully grasped before. Talent does not demand attention. It waits. It waits for courage, for timing, for the moment when fear loosens its grip. The night she was asked to play something simple was not special because of the audience or the place. It was special because she stopped shrinking. That choice continued to shape her days. She began making decisions with that same honesty. Saying yes when something felt right. Saying no when it didn't. Trusting the quiet voice inside her more than the loud opinions around her. People noticed the difference. Some admired it. Some questioned it. She accepted both. She no longer needed everyone to understand. Music remained her language, but it was no longer her only one. She carried that same truth into conversations, work, and relationships. She listened more deeply. She spoke with intention. Months later, she passed by another piano in a public space. Someone was playing softly, unsure of themselves. She paused nearby, listening without interrupting. When the person finished, she offered a gentle smile and a few encouraging words. She knew how much that could mean. Walking away, she felt a quiet sense of peace. Not pride, not achievement, just alignment. Her life was not louder. It was clearer. The world still moved quickly around her, full of noise and distraction. But inside, she carried a steady rhythm that guided her forward. She never forgot where it started. A simple request. A low expectation, a moment most people would have dismissed, but she answered it with everything she had. And in doing so, she learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop hiding what makes you feel alive. The piano did not change her life. She did. And that choice continued to echo, long after the final note faded.